I'm James. I'm the head of EX for Ipsos internationally. All consultants start with big statements in their talks, right? Which is this: it's never been a more important time to make sure that people have a great experience. I don't tend to like big statements like this. You see it quite a lot in HR or in EX. Gallup, 90% of people are disengaged at work. Or quiet quitting is sweeping the world and everyone is just sitting at their desks waiting to run out of the business. Generally speaking, they're built on sand in terms of data or whatever that consultant read in the Harvard Business Review that month, or Forbes, or whatever they were sent by a colleague. But what I would say is that Ipsos is in the habit of taking large amounts of data and trying to make sense out of them and trying to make truth out of them. And whenever we look at the data that we hold on the world at the moment, it's kind of true. We live in a world that's typified by what we call polycrisis, where you have lots of individual crises. When you put them together, they form more than the sum of their parts. Socioeconomic crisis, cost of living, inflation, the pandemic, the results of the pandemic and the way everyone wants to work, wars, political pressures, everyone in the world basically having an election this year, and all of the instability that will cause in terms of the way countries are governed. So there's a lot going on at the moment, and as a result, there's a lot going on in the contextual aspect of your employees' lives. So this, I think, is a fair, if big, statement. It's never been more important for you to understand your employees better, to listen to your employees better, potentially to listen to your employees more frequently, differently, whatever it is. Now, unusually, for one of these things, I'm going to say, please get your phones out, rather than kind of hiding them very politely to the end of the table, because we have some audience participation. And we want to get your thoughts on this. If you can point your cameras at the QR code, I want to understand, for those of you who work in EX or those of you who work in CX and know, what the current level of your maturity of your EX program is in the organisation you work for. So if you do this, it should pop up on your screen. You can answer the question, and then we'll have a look at the results in line. What we're asking here is, effectively, do you think that your EX program is foundational? You have a bit of strategy, you know you do a survey once a year, that's how you get the majority of your insight on your employees. Is it practiced? You have a function, you have a team of people that are doing this research. Maybe you're doing different kinds of research. You're looking at life cycle, you're looking at 360 or leadership. Or is it leading? You've got a multiple year strategy and roadmap in place for your EX program, and you're doing everything in terms of data analytics and people science and large data sets and so on and so forth. I'll give it 14 people have answered. I think that's basically it. What I'm going to get. So that's very compliant and very quick. Thank you very much. Okay, so what we see in the room here, and bear in mind there are some big brands in the room, is that just under half of you aren't doing very much more than, say, maybe an annual engagement survey or have a very foundational strategy in place. Half say that fine, you've got some people analytics, you've got some different kinds of research, and then one person says they've got a very leading program in place, and well done to them. But what this says to me is that I'm in the right place, because there's stuff we can talk about, stuff that we can work on. Because if you're just doing this, if you're just doing, say, an annual engagement survey for your employees, then what you're doing is you're saying, once a year your opinion matters to me. And if something really big hits the organisation 2 weeks after the survey, 3 weeks after the survey, we're not really going to know exactly how that's impacting the employee. And we're not really going to be able to understand how maybe that is going through to thinking about how it's impacting our customers. And generally speaking, whenever I've been doing this for a while, the vast majority of data, of research, of practice in EX is always focused on EX itself. You do an EX program to get an outcome. An outcome is an engagement score. An outcome is improved attrition. An outcome is improved absence rates. Most of the time when you're doing EX programs, you're trying to get some kind of data on the impact of a positive employee experience. If you have a good employee experience, then people go off sick less often. If you have a good employee experience, you're more able to attract talent to your organisation versus your competitors. Your engagement score is higher, and that goes into the CEO scorecard, so it's a very important thing for everyone to focus on. And that's great, and that's necessary, and that's really clear. But what we're starting to see more and more in the brands that we work with and the clients that we work with is a need to go beyond that and start to show the impact of the employee experience on something else outside of the HR remit, outside of the HR landscape. It could be operational. How do your employees impact efficiency in the organisation, productivity in your organisation? Or it could be, as we're here to talk about today, customer. How are the way that your employees are thinking, feeling and what they're doing, how is that impacting the outcomes of your customer's experience? And whenever we look into the data of whatever stripe it is, there's tons of evidence, there's tons of expectation, there's tons of assumption that those things happen. 70% of executives, 70% of executives believe that EX leads to improved CX. The academic literature says the same thing. This is a really interesting paper with a very long title, Employee Satisfaction, Customer Satisfaction and Financial Performance and Empirical Examination. I've read it so you don't have to. And what it says is that employee satisfaction accounts for 32% of the variance in your customer's experience. And that customer experience accounts for a quarter of the variance in your organization's financial performance. So if you're looking for ways to draw lines between your employees, your customers, and the money that you make as an organization, this is a really good paper to quote. Because effectively what you're saying here is your employees impact your top line by serving customers better, by improving share of wallet. Of course, your employees also impact your bottom line as well. If you're trying to link employees out to other things, if you have a positive culture, if you have a positive employee experience, they're more likely to come up with new ideas, they're more likely to be efficient, to build efficiency to what they're doing, which is improving your bottom line, and you're starting to create a positive jaws, your costs increasing at a lower rate than your revenue is increasing. So you believe it, the academic literature believes it, your customers believe it as well. So this is research that we did last year called Voices of Experience, where we asked people, what is your experience with the brands that you shop from, what is the experience with the brands you buy from? And when the experience with the brand was worse than expected, it was much more likely that the brand was offering different values, a different promise to its customers and its employees. So in essence, if what I say to my customers as a brand is fundamentally different to what I say to my employees as a brand, then my customers are more likely to have a worse experience with them. So customers believe they're linked to CEOs, but we all intuitively believe these two things are linked. And what we're trying to do today is to talk about that link, show you how it can have a significant impact on your program. That's why I asked the question about what your program was at the moment, and then maybe show some of the ways that we're working with clients to do that as well. And we call this the empathy ripple effect. What we say is effectively doing the right thing by employees is doing the right thing as customers. Because your employees, whether they're on the front line, whether they're in contact centres, whether they're in the back office, because they are dealing with customers or impacting the customer experience all the time, when employees' core needs are met, they're more likely to exhibit good behaviour towards customers, which means investing in employee experience is critical. It's critical for employee outcomes as well, but it's critical for your customer outcomes too, because the people standing in front of your customers day on day, or the people designing the website, or designing the e-commerce experience that your customers have, are all employees of your organisation, need to be in the right mindset, need to be thinking, feeling, doing the right thing. But it's the investing in employee experience that I think we sometimes find challenging as HR professionals. I know before I was here, I used to work for HSBC, and I was always kind of trying to shout as loud as I could for as much budget as I could to improve the employee experience. It's difficult to do, and so showing this kind of ROI is a really useful way to actually be able to catch the budget you need to improve the lives of the people who work for your organisation. I'm going to ask you another question now, so phones back out please. Level of EX and CX collaboration is there in the organisations that you work for? So you can say there's no collaboration, you can say there's a bit, we're kind of integrating, we're talking to one another, or you can say there's strong and ongoing collaboration between the two. I'm looking for 14 responses again, and I'm not going to carry on until I get them. We'll be here all day. That one person again is doing an excellent job. Do they really want me? We've got nothing to teach you. Nothing. Perfect, thank you very much. Okay, so again, the number's missing, but I'm going to calculate it at around 64%. Nearly 2/3 is saying there's no collaboration at all. You have an EX program, you have a CX program, never the twain meet at all. Which is, by the way, exactly what we found when we did this research elsewhere. So this isn't unique. This isn't new news. And yes, kind of a third of you find you're starting to look out. As I say, someone's got it sorted, which is fantastic. I think actually when I looked at this from last year, I think that might have been 10%, so slightly better. But this was definitely absolutely true. That we don't tend to see much collaboration and much integration between these two because of silos, because of politics, because of inefficiencies in the data, because CX is doing research every day and EX is doing research once every 3 years, because you can't align those two things together. But if you can do it, and if you can do it well, what I'm going to show you is the power. And we call it, certainly CX narrative. In essence, how do you show the impact of employees on the customer experience, but then backtrack into that experience to show the impact of investments that you're making? And if it moves forward, there we go, 64. I was right, 64%. Maths. Still, there we go, perfect. Right, so the EXCX value chain. This is what I'm talking about in terms of that way of projecting forward and projecting back to start to win the battle in the end. Customer outcomes. We understand what customer outcomes are, right? It could be promoter score, which is IPOK, I should say that, or customer satisfaction. And actually, if you work with Ipsos, as you should, we have a way of calculating the financial impact of those customer outcomes. We call it ROCSI, return on CX investment. In other words, when you invest in your CX program, it increases these 4 things causatively. This isn't correlation, this is a causative model of financial modeling that says invest in your CX program, you see your share of spend, your share of wallet go up. More of your target customers are choosing you versus your competitors. You see your retention go up. You tend to have people coming back to you again and again, and if they're at risk, you get to keep them, you get to wipe that need. Advocacy, they share their experience with other people. And operational efficiency, they're served in an efficient way, they're served in a cost-effective way for your organization. So we've got that end of the scale kind of down, that's fine. So we understand how customer outcomes impact financial performance. What we need to understand is how you link employee outcomes to customer outcomes. You take what you're doing in your EX program, how can you actually show how that's moving the needle in the customer outcome? If you can do that, if you can pick your metrics, show a link between the two, well, that's fantastic, because all of the work that you are doing as EX, I know all of you EX professionals, but that you are doing as EX professionals makes it really easy for you then to think about how the cultural initiatives, the leadership training, the development programs that you have in place are then impacting customer outcomes. Because any research that you do will tell you what the drivers of a positive experience are. You do an engagement survey, you understand what the key drivers of engagement are. And if ENPS is your key outcome, you'll be able to understand, or you should do, what drives that. And you'll understand the prioritization of those drivers. This is the most important driver we found of our employee experience. Well, that's fantastic. And as an HR function, we know we have to take action on surveys. We know that when we see something that's important or something that's negative, well, then we take action as a result of it. So we might want to develop initiatives against that individual driver. But it might be that we want to do this one, which is very expensive, that we think will be very impactful, but the organisation only wants us to do this one because it's cheap, and we have budgets, and they're under pressure in HR. By creating this flow through to show the financial impact of anything that you put into this system, you can start to win the battle about which initiative to do. Because if I was able to tell my CEO or CFO that this initiative, which I want to do, has the biggest impact on the driver of my outcome, which has the biggest driver of my customer outcome, which Roxy tells me increases customer spend by this. That's a very different conversation I'm having with my stakeholder than just, oh, I want to do a training program, it will cost 2 million. I want to do a training program, it will cost 4 million. So by linking EX and CX, oh, by the way, it turns out that's the best initiative, not the $4 one. By linking these things together, by starting to link those two programs together, it allows you to prove the business case for what you want to do as EX professionals. And quite often when I talk about CX and EX, I'm talking to CX professionals, you're all over this. CX professionals generally want EX data. They want it given to them and then they want to analyze it rather than work in collaboration in some cases. But they're here and they understand this link. And sometimes it's proving the case and helping CX professionals to understand why do this, what's the benefit, where's the pay. The benefit is in being able to help you deliver your strategy, but also showing return on investment. HR functions are central functions, right? The way my boss always used to say it is every 1st of January he'd go into the CEO's office and basically ask him to write a check for the costs of running that function for a year. You're not a top line generative function. So showing financial and operational impact on what you do is a really key way to do that. Which sounds great, but how on earth do you do that? And I'm not sure how much time I've got left, but in the time I've got left, I'm going to run you through it. Perfect, I'm good. We talk about it in 3 stages to our clients. We talk about baseline, we talk about discovery, and we talk about implementation. And no matter where you are on that bar chart of integration or that pie chart of maturity, there is an approach here that can work for you. So the first way to do it is to create a baseline. Just integrating your reporting is a really good first step. We've got CX data, we've got EX data. How can we start to prove that link between the two? Because proving the link is the most important first step. Yes, we know the link is there. The academic literature says so. Your CEO probably thinks so. Your customers definitely know so. But it's still useful to need to work out what your KPI is. So bringing CX and EX data sets together is a really key first step. Once you've done that, you need to analyze the data to prove the linkage, to understand which are the outcomes that have the biggest impact across that barrier, across that divide. Once you've got those two things in place, you can start to understand, and define things a bit better. So understanding, for example, through mirror analysis, and I'll talk about this more in a second, where are the gaps in your employee? If your employees intuitively understand your customers, sure, but actually, where are the gaps? Are there particular populations that have a significant impact on your customers, but that they aren't understanding they have that impact on customers? Journey mapping, your frontline employees, what is it that are the practical barriers to them serving your customers well? Walking an employee through their day, how do you get into the office? What happens when you get there? When you swipe your card to your POS, does it work? How is the system? What are the fundamental practical barriers to them being able to serve customers well? And then once you've done that, you can then start to improve by doing better blueprints, and with your customers, sure, with your employees as well. Building those initiatives, working out what's going to work, proving the business case, and getting the investment. By the way, not to frame this in any way, but when we did this with the external population last year, I think it was over 50% had it annually or less frequently. So either they don't do it at all or they do it annually. Okay, so there we go. So again, over 3/4 of you aren't in any way analysing those two data sets together, even though they will absolutely exist in your organisation. And I guess some of the barriers that you see to that, like I say, are the frequency of the research isn't the same, or the data sets or the question sets aren't the same, or we just don't talk to one another, or as happened with me actually when I asked my counterpart in CX a few years ago when I was at HSBC, can we do this? Yeah, will you give me your data? Well, no, let's do it together. No, just give me your data and I'll get my people to analyse it. Well, that's, the conversation stopped there. So the vast majority of people are not doing this at all. But it's actually not that difficult. If you've got an EX data set, if you've got a CX data set, if you can look at a low enough level in the organisation to put the two together, you can start to prove the case. I think my clicker has a problem with Mentimeter slides. Thank you. What are the benefits? Well, I've talked about them. If you do this linkage, if you put these two data sets together, you can understand not only that KPIs are linked, but which KPIs are linked. You can pick your metrics. You can look at the most impactful ones. For lots of clients, they'll do NPS and eNPS. But for others, they might just pick an outcome. It might be advocacy, it might be trust, it might be well-being. We had one supermarket client in Latin America who focused purely on the link between employee well-being and how well they were serving customers. As a result, they got investment they needed to renovate all of their sites, staff rooms, because they knew that if you improved well-being by X amount, you'd be able to improve customer satisfaction by X amount. It's critical again in terms of showing them the impact of particular initiatives. And obviously the EX work that you do will tell you what the drivers are, which things you need to shift. So you put your two data sets together, you've shown the link between the two through analysis, then you go into your EX program to show what are the most important factors for that. Up here, they thought the operational stuff was really important. We've got to get our invoicing out, we've got to get the authorization stuff quickly. But actually for the customers, it wasn't important at all. And then there were some that kind of both people tended to agree with. So mirror analysis uncovers unmet needs and gaps in your employees' expectations of what your customers think are important. And what that then does, obviously it gives you very clear gaps to fill. So if this isn't important, well, what does that mean? Is that an understanding gap? Is it a training gap? Is it a cultural gap? You start to imply the things that you need to fix in order for your customers' expectations and your employees' understanding to be linked. And then, as I say, you go through, you can look at really good journey mapping. This is something we did with Virgin Trains, which is a train company. It's actually a really lovely case study. One of the biggest barriers for food satisfaction on Virgin Trains was the boiled eggs. Poached eggs, sorry, not boiled eggs, poached eggs. So the chefs told us that they wanted to be able to poach their eggs themselves, fresh for a customer. Because the customers are saying, well, the quality of the eggs isn't very great. The chefs are saying, well, yeah, well, that's because you give me a pre-poached egg in a little bag, and I stick it in some hot water. I'm a chef. I've trained as a chef for 6 years. I can poach an egg. Just let me poach the eggs fresh for the customers. So that kind of level of specificity only comes when you really do kind of in-depth journey mapping with your employees as well as your customers. What are those barriers? How does a customer go through their journey with Virgin Trains, but actually how do the employees map onto that in terms of what they need to do what they're doing well, what the barriers are to serving customers well. That was all I really wanted. It was a bit of a canter through. As I say, we're going to share the details with you. But just to summarise, what we're saying is that linking ES and CX, sure, everyone understands intuitively that it's a good thing. But practical measures that you can take in order to link those two programs aren't necessarily challenging. I think lots of people talk about EX and CX as this really big thing. It's very zeitgeisty and everyone wants to do it. But at a very practical level, we're talking about taking two programs that churn out similar data as experience data. It asks people's emotions, it asks their sentiment towards an experience. And just even aligning those two data sets together can start taking a really long way to proving and understanding the links between the two. But that the outcome and that the knock-on impact for an EX practitioner isn't just what we're giving our data to the CX team and they're using it to improve your customer experience. It had a really significant impact on the way that you implement your strategy, you define your strategy, and you actually win the argument for your strategy with your stakeholders.